just a brief kind of review of what we went over. And I think what's really important is, first and foremost, determine whether the whole program, SBIR and STTR, is a good fit for clients. It's a great fit for some clients. It's really not for others. And to do that justice, we're really going to want to put in place a questionnaire or process of determining or understanding the client's circumstances, and make sure that the product itself is a product that is a good fit for an SBIR. And then determine the best customer. And the thing that we need to keep in mind is there's some granting agencies out there that are not customers themselves. And so that sometimes makes it a little tricky. Like, they'll have programs, Department of Energy, and they may in the end not be the customer. So keep in mind, you can't think that because you do the project with the Department of Energy is going to fund something, because they just probably aren't the customer. And then we're going to do a deep dive. And again, it's always good to look for options for SBIR assistance. In some cases, there are some programs that we're going to research TABA, and then also whether there are other kinds of assistance, like whether that client would do better having a counselor or some kind of outside contractor to help them, depending on their resources and where they're at. And then encourage the client to find a customer, because that is just like one of the most important things that we've been saying all along. Alan, go ahead and forward. And the most important thing that I think anybody can get out of the sessions that we've done, and we've heard it from numerous folks, including Navy and everyone that we've had speak, it's all about relationships. So, you know, encouraging clients to find different avenues to meet with the clients and develop those relationships with customers, because that is key in this whole thing. So phase 3, importance, data rights, the right to a sole source contract. You get an exemption from the SBIR size standard, no limit on the data size of procurement, the right to receive a subcontractor on a sole source basis, and the ability to pursue R&D services, productions, or any combination. And what phase 3 is about, and what this all is about, and the end game for every one of our entrepreneurs, is they need contracts. I mean, they're in this first and foremost to get the work. And that's what we've got to remember, is the end game, and what is the most important thing to the clients and to really getting to commercialization. And that's the contracts. Go ahead, Alan.
So I got a question for you, Laurie. A little bit of confusion maybe on my part, but when I forgot his name now, FTI, Mike?
Yep, Frontier Technology, Inc.
Yeah. When he spoke to us about phase 3 SBIR, can you clarify, does someone have to be, I know that we heard a lot with Encountering Innovation multiple times about if you've got even a phase 1, remember that you now have the ability to have a sole source with the DoD because of your SBIR, or with the government. I guess it kind of depends on who they're working with. Can you clarify, do they have to have an SBIR, or what the value of having an SBIR for the phase 3 or not?
I have not done, I have never done a contract with Frontier Technology, Inc., and I quite frankly want to do that. I want to go through one of those, just from the standpoint of learning and figuring out all the ins and outs of how that works. But my understanding in talking to Mike is it does not have to be a client that has had an SBIR in the past. they have cracked the code essentially of using that phase 3 or using SBIRs to be able to reach back into previous SBIRs and initiate contracts. And so it may be that there's a topic area that a customer is interested in, and there was a previous SBIR, and they have the ability to go in and initiate a contract on a phase 3 to use for another client. My understanding of how that works. So if you've got a technology area that is of interest to the government and the government wants a contract with you, Frontier Technologies, Inc. knows how to use that phase 3 contracting mechanism to help that client get a contract, essentially.
Okay.
Using
And
phase 3.
so, and from your perspective, since Mike's not on, I feel more comfortable asking this. Do you believe that FTI, what is your belief as to how much this is costing the client by working with someone like FTI?
To me, it really doesn't cost the client. What it essentially assists with is helping a client get a contract that otherwise wasn't having any success getting the contract. Now,
okay,
they may have to share some of the funding on that contract. FTI has to have a portion of that work, my understanding.
right.
But if you think about it, half of a contract is better than no contract.
Right, I got you. Well, and from what he said,
it's not a fee for the customer to write a check to FTI. It's we go get a contract together and they do a scope of the work.
right, and that's exactly what I understood from it. So basically, he said we will not do a pass through, and what I understood the way he was putting that is we're not going to charge a pass through rider or commission for you. We're going to do work, and if we can do work, then we can get a contract. We can work together.
And again, some of these clients that don't have a lot of staff, that may be the best way to do it anyway. So if you can essentially hire a consultant in Frontier Technologies, Inc., and they're going to help you get a contract, then they can help you be more successful. Yeah. And again, I really, really want to run through a contract with FTI. I have not had the opportunity to do that yet.
And that's, I think that's what we're hoping for. I know it is with working with you with our CARES Act funding. That's something that we're looking forward to. So we'll hopefully experience that.
I'd like to identify some clients that they are a perfect fit for. Take those clients to FTI. Let FTI screen those clients and pick a couple and let them run through it. And I would love to participate in that.
And so Barbara Bonner is on with us from Oklahoma, and I don't know if part of her team is, but I see her. And so that's Barbara, that's part of what we're talking about. So with what I just sent her, as we go through this, that's what I would say, be thinking about these different vehicles that Laurie's going to be talking about. Okay, I'll be quiet.
Good question. Thank you, Alan.
And Laurie, it's Bill.
Yes.
Maybe I probably heard this and I wasn't sure, but I think Frontier can actually work with, as long as your company has had the smell of SBIR on it. I mean, they could go back and reach back to a phase 1 SBIR and get contracts off of that too, if you're far enough along, correct?
Yes, and my understanding, by the way, is Frontier Technologies is not the only one doing this. But I will tell you that Frontier Technologies has been doing it longer than anyone. They're the ones that I know about that everybody's talking about. I think they have, 28 in process right now, he said. I mean, they're starting to really crack the code on this. And I met with them first a couple of years ago when they were just starting to do it. And they've won awards, etc. And I just think they're upstanding folks, and they really figured out how to do this new kind of crack the code on the phase 3 piece. So we ought to take advantage of that.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay. Feel free. I like the dialogue. So, and the whole reason why we've got to look for ways to help these entrepreneurs is there was a report that was done by the GAO, the Government Accountability Office, in July of 2018. And the standard contracting method that the government uses, FAR-based contracts. On the average, it takes them 387 days to issue a FAR-based contract. And by the way, that they bragged about that being a reduction of 18% from the previous year. So the bottom line is that's just not going to work for these entrepreneurs. Excuse me. Go ahead, Alan. And the reason why is, again, time is crucial. I mean, let's face it, resources are crucial to these small businesses. So we've got to find the quickest path from where they're at to getting them assistance to get them to that contract. I mean, that's the bottom line of where we're trying to get. And time is important, how much time it takes for us to do that. So Agile Acquisition can be a solution, and I have seen a tremendous increase in these Agile acquisitions. I mean, I heard about OTAs and some of these Agile acquisition contracts 10 years ago. A lot of these things were started back, 15, 20 years ago, but people were not using them. And now with a lot of the innovation and technology coming down, the government has started really realizing the value in Agile acquisition. So some of these Agile acquisition contracts are OTAs, or other transaction authorities. Pias, partnership intermediary agreements, and that's what I had predominantly at DefenseWorks. I had 6 different Pias. CRADAs, and then GSA, which GSA has a couple of different ways to go, and that is Gsa Schedules. And then GSA started a new contracting mechanisms called a Gsa CSO, Commercial Services Offering, and that is kind of the GSA version of a PIA or an OTA. And then, as we discussed in a whole session, the phase 3 with a partner. Again, that's still an Agile acquisition contract. So we're going to explore each of these just a little bit. So other transaction authority has a certain authority, 10 USC 237 1B, and it is all about prototyping and research. And I will tell you, a few years ago when this started being a really prominent thing, it was all consortium-based OTAs, meaning businesses needed to pay an annual fee and join a consortium. They are now starting to do some non-consortium based OTAs. And some of them are operating better than others. Most are managed by nonprofit or private sector entities, although there are a couple that are managed by government entities. And they have expanded the authorities. Originally, you could use OTAs to get a prototype manufactured. And by the way, you could use it only for that prototype. You could not use it for follow-on work. But since then, there's been a lot of push towards expanding it, and they were successful in the last year. And now, if you do a prototype under an OT, you can have a follow-on contract as long as it was competitively bid within that OTA group or by that OTA group. So that's a good thing. You can actually go straight to a program of record. OTs are not under the federal acquisition regulation. And what that means is this contracting is much easier. It just doesn't have all the regulations and stipulations that a normal contract has. And they have really been also expanding it recently to encompass a physical or virtual model and services and processes, where originally an OTA was strictly in and around manufacturing. So they are really, really increasing the use of OTAs, and you're going to see more and more of those as time goes on. Do you have a question, Bill?
Yeah, Laurie, I was just going to, could you explain just the significance of when you said program of record? I know what you're talking about, but that was new to me a number of years ago when I got into this stuff.
Yeah,
Could you
so
explain the significance of that?
yeah, so basically, if you are selected under an OTA to do a prototype, and the government likes that prototype, and they can just give you a contract, and you become the prime on that contract moving forward. And you become a program of record, so that I'll give you an example. A friend of mine developed some software for ships for the Navy, and now all ships that get commissioned are required to add that software to their ships. And so they are, the program just gets refunded every year to be included on all of those ships moving forward. And that is a huge, huge thing for an entrepreneur to get.
So the program of record is actually a program, a running program that they're actively buying things for, and it's funded.
Yeah, just, well, and so, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, but then, so they're getting on board with something that has an ongoing funding stream, right? So
Yeah,
you're actually, you finally get connected with a program of record, then you're really in the system.
Yeah, so the example is all ships that get built are going to include this software, or all planes that get built, there's already going to be a line item in the building of that particular product, so that gets included in all of their products moving forward. And I think it took the small company I know 20 years to get there. But, and they started out as an SBIR company, by the way.
So Laurie, are we talking basically on the bullet point of allows for a non-competitive follow-on OTs that was competitively awarded? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, it actually allows for a non-competitive contract, if you will. It kind of is, kind of isn't. But all I'm saying is, once your product gets accepted into the government and they really, really like it, and they want to keep buying it moving forward, then you can move all the way to a program of record, just like this SBIR company that I know that happened to.
Okay.
What this allows them to do is, and it happened to us on Pias. When I first started my Pias, we could do a project with a company to do a prototype, but we weren't allowed to award a follow-on contract with the government. But then we started bringing the government to the table. And once a company was selected in that program, the government then could go ahead and buy that product from that customer. What was happening in the past is, on OTs, TAs, and Pias, is that company would work and develop a prototype, and then the government would take their prototype and put it out for bid. So the company that developed the prototype with the government could essentially lose their product.
Wow.
That's what was happening several years ago, until we got all of this, kept pushing for change in this legislation, and we were successful. So
basically the small business could go out there and do all the research development, get paid for part of it, or reimbursed, if you will, but at the end of the day, not end up being the one to benefit from commercializing it.
Correct. That was happening at one time.
Wow. Okay.
They were actually taking that client's product that got developed and saying, well, you just developed it in this prototype phase. Now we got to go back and put it out for competitive bid. And
Okay.
which really just was not right. And the government agreed to it, and now is allowing for that to lead to a direct contract and then eventually program a record. You know, that's obviously the golden place that everybody wants to get.
So, and I don't know how much time we have, so I don't want to go too deep of a dive here, but I am curious, if I'm the client, go back to your software development as an example. We've gotten through the SBIR, and now we're able to create a product to sell. And so we get selected. How is there, if I'm a sole source, how is there a check and balance to the price that I charge for the product? How does that take place?
Well, I can give you examples. I mean, the government still negotiates.
Okay.
So when you get a contract, the government will still come back and they'll say, hey, we want to award you this contract. They can still go back and negotiate with you and say, hey, is there any way you can reduce this or change that? Or
okay.
They will go back and forth on a contract. It's not just, here's your contract and you get paid exactly how it is and everything's stays exactly how you proposed.
Okay, good.
What happens with OTs and with Pias too, actually, is when there is an agency that wants an OT or a Pia, it's typically co-written together and there's back and forth. So they'll say, hey, you know, we want you to deliver 3 different events or 3 prototypes within this time frame, and they may come back and say, you know, there's no way we can execute in that amount of time. Can you live with 2, you know, different? It's not like they just write a proposal and it has to be accepted like it is. That's not how it works at all.
Gotcha. Thank you. That helps a lot.
Yeah. There's back and forth, but I'll tell you, it's not like the back and forth under a federal acquisition regulation contract. And I'll tell you, OTs and Pias tend to be, when they're originally written, not as specific. So you're at the end, Alan.
I know. I kept trying to back up, and I went the wrong direction.
Yeah, that's
okay. Sorry.
Under federal acquisition regulation, nobody can like get information that everybody else doesn't have. So if an OT was a FAR-based contract, that allowing somebody that did the prototype to get a follow-on contract would probably not fly under federal acquisition regulation. So they're allowed to do a lot of things under OTAs and Pias that they can't do in the normal FAR-based contracting rules. And by the way, the contracting officers that can execute OTAs and Pias are warranted contracting officers. They have special training. And one of the problems in the government is there's a shortage of those warranted contracting officers. So sometimes that's a challenge, but it is very different.
Laurie, question about that. Now, once you go through this process and you started delivering, if you were working toward a program record or something, that contract would probably be FAR-based, correct?
Yes, more than likely it would.
Okay.
Yes.
So as we go through, so for those that are like me and my head's kind of torqued a little bit with me trying to figure this out. This is part of the training that we're working on with our CARES Act funding, where we go back to those, utilizing those clients that are developing but existing for us to help work on commercializing. We go through some of this in those examples for me, I think I'll start getting it a lot better. Bill probably understands it because he's been through some of that with his background. So for those of you that are kind of challenged.
You're muted, Alan.
Oh, yeah. Doesn't show I'm muted.
Alan.
Let me text him.
He must be on the phone. I understand some of this. I'm learning a lot too, Laurie, but I wasn't trying to learn it in a half an hour either.
No, yeah, there's a lot to it. And let me tell you, Bill, it changes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're constantly changing things. And I mean, a lot of times for the best, trust me. But when I started with Pias, we were not allowed, we never had contracting at the table. At some of our events, we started having contracting right at the table with us.
Yeah.
And so it changed the whole thing to be no kidding. When you walk out of here, you can have a contract.
Well, it's interesting to me that, you know, talking about these OTAs, I actually know somebody that is working. He helped put together an organization that can run OTAs through it. And, you know, he was trying to get me to join, and he wanted me to spend $20,000 a year for a membership. And I was like, you know, I'm sorry. He said, well, that's nothing for a marketing budget. And I said, well, it is for a small company. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, a lot of the OTAs too, as time has gone on, OTAs are supposed to expedite the contract award, and a lot of them have gotten really gunked up where it's really not gotten, it started becoming slower because they're executing so many contracts. And, you know, they're going through their aches and pains. I'll put it to you that way. I have not done a deep dive into all the OTAs, but there are some out there that are free.
Yeah.
The problem with one of the free ones is it's really hard to get on their system. It's down a lot. I just happen to know the folks who manage that. So I've assisted some companies in getting on that particular OTA. So, you know, there's just lots of ins and outs with them. So they're not for everybody. None of this is, you know, a good fit for everybody, but that's why kind of knowing different places that you can get contracts and expedite the whole process and accelerate is important. And over time, like I said, I want to develop a tool where there's kind of a decision diagram. Is it a fit for this? Is it a fit for this? Is it a fit for that? And who are those that exist?
Yeah.
For instance, there's 52 people now. When I started, again, I had 2, and I was the only one that had multiple. I ended up with 6, which was a lot. TechLink has a lot as well, I think, but I don't think they have 6. They probably have 2 or 3. But anyway, so partnership, go ahead.
Can you explain, is there a significant difference between OTAs and Pias, or is that deeper dive than we do right now?
Yeah, I think so. Pias are authorized under a different, it's 15 USC 3715. And actually there's a couple of variations of Pias, but I'm not going to get into that. Doesn't really matter. But a PIA is essentially an agreement or MOU with a nonprofit. A PIA has to be managed by a nonprofit. So that's one difference. OTAs can be managed by a private sector entity. And the other thing that is different from an OTA is only a government entity who has a lab is allowed to have a PIA. It's premised around tech transfer and tech transition. And so the logic there is if you don't have a lab involved in your government agency, then you don't qualify to have a PIA.
To run a PIA or to get a contract with a PIA?
You can't run a PIA. Anybody can have a contract with a PIA.
Right.
Anybody can get awarded something through a PIA. But to manage a PIA, you have to be a nonprofit. A private entity cannot have a PIA with the government. You have to be a nonprofit.
Okay.
So Laurie, I don't know if I missed this and Brett says hello and thank you for your service. I'm a little confused in what is the purpose, what is the benefit for the PIA? How's this benefiting?
So the PIA allows the government to fund a group or a nonprofit to basically build an organization to provide a service. So they're a service organization to help the government and engage with industry and academia and the ecosystem and help with tech transfer and tech transition.
So is this designed to be a singular focus, like for one product, one technology, or is this designed, is it more of how will a client know that they should be getting involved in the PIA?
It really kind of understanding what PIAs are out there and what they're focused on. Most PIAs do have a singular focus, like Doolittle Institute, for instance, is around weapons with AFRL. But I will tell you that SoftWorks with SOCOM is anything that SOCOM wants and needs. And that's because of how that contract was established. So the contract that's behind the PIA, the specifics on the PIA is what drives what they can do with the PIA. The PIA gets written a certain way that it describes what it impacts and what it can cover and what it can't.
So how does the client know to be comfortable, or should they be comfortable working with a PIA?
I would say absolutely they should be comfortable working with a PIA. If a PIA has a challenge out there and says, hey, we're looking for somebody that can provide, SoftWorks did one that was an oxygen mask for dogs. If SoftWorks is out there with that opportunity, then it fits within their scope of work. So the client doesn't have to worry about whether what they're doing fits. They just need to know who the PIAs are out there, kind of track what kind of opportunities they have and what's a good fit for them. They don't have to worry about.
So kind of in the world of FTI, as an example, who discovers who normally? Do we need to be working with our clients to be looking for PIAs, or while we're working with the client, like we just socialize something for encountering innovation, or you happen to know, and we're working with a client, is someone else discovering the PIA that exists and coming to the client? How do we manage that?
The best thing for our small businesses is to educate them on who those PIAs are out there, and how do we mine the opportunities for the clients.
Okay, so
nobody's got this whole. Unfortunately, I was wanting so bad to pull this together so that there's one-stop shopping for these small businesses. It doesn't exist. Oh. It's all these fragmented programs out there that are challenging for these small businesses, A, to know about, and B, be able to monitor all of it is a huge challenge. The best thing, again, number one thing, is who is your best client? And then if that client, for instance, if it's Engineer Research Development Center, for instance, MGM Works is the PIA affiliated with ERDIC. And so if we find a client and that client is in civil engineering or works, or cement is a big focus for ERDIC, I would say what we need to do is connect them with ERDIC Works. They need to be monitoring ERDIC Works, and you know, be mindful that that would be a good place that they might see some contracting opportunities. Make introductions. Let ERDIC Works get to know them. Again, relationship. that relationship is not only with government customers, but with intermediaries. It's important to develop a relationship.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
tech stuff, right? And government customers.
Very good. Okay, thanks.
So an intermediary, I think one of the biggest differences between an OT and an intermediary is it enables the government to pay for support services to support tech transfer and transition. So it's like they allow them to put together staff to provide services for their customers for that whole activity of transfer and transition. And that intermediary, the biggest thing they're charged with is acting like a neutral, objective third-party broker. And they can actively market lab technologies that the labs want to transfer to private sector. So that's some of the big ways I think it differs from OTs. So if you want to go to the next slide, Alan. So CRADAs are cooperative research and agreement, or research and development agreements. And they are also intended to speed the commercialization of tech. They were developed to optimize resources and protect the private company. They were really, really popular, and I heard about them a lot. They're still doing a fair amount of them, but I think we're hearing about Pias and OTAs more so, although CRADAs still exist. It allows both any parties involved to keep the research results confidential for up to 5 years. And private corporations can participate in CRADAs and are allowed to file patents and retain those patents. And the government is allowed to have a license to that patent under a CRADA. A lot of times there's research organizations and a lot of universities do CRADAs.
Well, so I'm sitting here trying to understand. I think we've got at least one client that's recently either been invited, and however you say that, is now participating with a CRADA or has been invited to. How different is the CRADA from the PIA?
Very. Again, a PIA funds an intermediary to have a full-blown staff that works with everybody to try to transfer tech and tech transfer, any and all, a whole bunch, where a CRADA is around a specific topic. It's a specific project. So, yeah, it's very different. And actually, under a CRADA, it can provide personnel, services, facilities, and equipment, intellectual property, and resources to a university. A CRADA is not allowed to award funds to a university. That's one thing they can't award under a CRADA because it's a cooperative agreement. So private sector folks can receive resources like labs, equipment, all that stuff, but they also can receive funds under a CRADA.
Okay.
So that's another difference. But yeah, they're very different. Again, it's not this broad, overarching contract that exists to do this over and over and over again. It's more project specific.
So who will be
what I've seen?
Who is initiating the CRADA?
The government entity.
So
a government customer will initiate a CRADA.
Like a Air Force Research, AFRL?
Yeah, AFRL has a bunch of CRADAs. Yeah, Air Force, ERDIC.
Okay. So they're trying to accomplish a certain technology feat, and they discover a client, an innovator, with something that they think that they could use, and so they create the CRADA to work to where they can cooperate. Okay, that makes sense.
And I will say that most government contracting agencies are far more comfortable with CRADAs than they are with OTAs and Pias. There's a lot of government contracting folks that are not comfortable and don't use Pias and OTAs. As an example, the Army has not really engaged in Pias a whole lot. They tend to do what they call PPPs, or public-private partnerships, that are kind of a quasi-partnership agreement, but they have done very few Pias, to my knowledge. They're just not comfortable with them. Air Force is probably the biggest one that has done the most Pias out there. So very common under Air Force, not as common under Army. Just different agencies have different appetites for kinds of contracts out there. And some of it is limited by their staff. Again, if they don't have a warranted officer, then they can't do a PIA. And by the way, Air Force in general, like I'm trying to think of when we did AFWorks, the original AFWorks PIA was done under AFRL because the Air Force command that wanted the PIA is not a lab. So they could not do a PIA. And it's all under contract law. But the big thing is just to understand that there's all these different things that companies can be on the lookout for and participate with that can actually get them eventually to a contract. And that's the end of that's the end game that we're all trying to get to.
So Bijou says, it is my understanding that businesses can reach out to put together a CRADA for their own needs. Is that not the case?
They could pursue it, but I've had a lot harder time, I will just tell you, as far as time consumption. I have learned the hard way that it is a lot harder to convince the government than they need something versus being the government's idea.
Gotcha.
There may be some folks that have had success with that. My experience is it's a lot longer, harder road than if the government has that idea initially. If you can find, if I were a small business, the biggest thing I would do to try to accomplish it that way is to find a champion within the government to champion it for me, versus you as a private sector citizen or private sector business trying to champion that. You've got to have a government champion that is out there pushing to make it a government idea.
Okay. You ready for me to move?
Yeah, yep. And GSA, and this is a question. Has SBDCs of Kansas or any of the other communities interacted much with the GSA office?
I haven't. Now, I think now you asked Scott Knapp with PTAC in our case, and I think that's much more a PTAC question or answer. I would think PTACs would say yes.
PTAC doesn't necessarily work with the GSA either. They're two, at least in Florida, they're two different entities. And I will tell you that there's some very, very good GSA offices. Your GSA field office is out of Kansas City, Missouri for your Region 6. And I don't know anything about your GSA field office. I would like to. And I would actually say the state of Florida field office is phenomenal. And that guy is so helpful. What I'm going to do down the road is call him, and I'm going to see if he'll make an introduction for us to some good folks in his GSA field office, because there are really, really good folks out there. And I'll tell you, they will hold your hand. To write a GSA schedule, there's all kinds of consultants out there, and they can charge a lot of money to get a small business on a GSA schedule. A GSA schedule allows a company to kind of broadcast this service or product offering, and you have to put it in the right category. There's a lot of ins and outs to it. And what I'd like to do is do a whole training on GSA schedule and understanding it, and then start developing that relationship with that GSA office in Kansas, because the field office can help a small business write their GSA schedule. And again, a small business can hire somebody. There's all kinds of consultants out there that can do it. But if you can find a good GSA office that resides within your region, that's what they do. They help the small business write a schedule. So that's a whole lesson. But a lot of services, software, training, different things that some of your customers might fit within, they may be a great candidate for a GSA schedule. You pre-negotiate prices. There's lots to it, but it's an easy way for the government to buy from you.
Okay. Gsa spoke up and said that they, speaking of the GSA, that they do with their sister PTAC office, that I guess they work with them.
That's great. And like I said, my experience, I guess I should say, is there's some really strong GSA offices that are super helpful. And then, you want to find the right people in the right office to work with on that. And then there's a new contracting mechanism out there. I learned about it, or actually it was used, and maybe it's been around longer than I know, but my first experience was on a follow-on AFWorks contract. It went to a CSO, which is a commercial services offering. And it's a way for the DoD to acquire items, technologies, or services. And it's kind of sort of like a PIA. I still don't think it's as good as a PIA. It has its restrictions, but just know that there is a new contracting mechanism out there called a commercial services offering. And that's going to take a little bit more research because, again, that's another kind of quasi new thing that has been evolving and changing rapidly. And I never had a CSO, so I haven't worked a lot with the CSO, but know that that's what AFWorks went to after the PIA. They did a CSO directly, the Air Force, with GSA, and GSA is managing that CSO. Are there questions on that, Alan? I see some questions.
So, yes, we got one that says, as a small business just beginning the process to pursue SBIR and STTR contracts and grants, in our negotiations with the involved university professors, do you have guidance on IP ownership? We are currently exploring a 50-50 ownership of the IP. However, we are a woman-owned business, 8A, and minority small business. Are there compelling considerations that we would be better suited pursuing majority ownership?
I think that's kind of probably a better offline, fully understanding what the goals are, what everybody's trying to accomplish, and do a deeper dive to answer that question. I hate to steer you in one direction without knowing all the facts and where everything's at, because there's a lot to that question. Could be a lot to that question.
Yeah. Okay.
So if it's sharing IP with a university or somebody, I would hesitate to do that. But anyway, it really is a understanding all the ins and outs of where you're going, what you're trying to accomplish, who the customer is, who are you sharing the IP with, what's the product. I think a deeper dive into that would be a better way to go.
So from my sales perspective and very limited background within a university, my thought is I'm willing to share the IP ownership. If I was a small business owner, if I really felt like the university that is coming to me with this is very strong in marketing the IP. If they're not strong in marketing IP, I'm thinking, what am I getting for this? Am I just getting a big? I mean, because there's more than one place to get someone to help with engineering or IP. Not the IP, but the actual development to where I need IP than just the university. And so if I'm getting their quote engineering services to finalize this, but I don't have any, they're not good at marketing. They don't push their products, their licensing. I'm thinking, what am I getting? Well, that's my thought.
The last thing you want to do is work with the university that's just going to put your product on the shelf.
Yeah. And I'm seeing that. That's part of my concern.
Quite a bit. So, I'm not saying that happens universally. I'd like to understand better the situation before answering that.
Yeah. Well, every one of them has a percentage, whether they can publish that or we can figure it out. If they've got that should be a hard fact number, however much license IP they have sitting on the shelf versus what's been commercialized.
Bill? I think a lot of that has to do with who actually came up with the idea and who owns any kind of patents, or who's actually been the one pursuing it. If you're taking a university idea and then spinning it off into a commercial product, then obviously they own more of it. But if you're just trying to get some help with your idea, not necessarily. And in our company, we've done a lot of partnering on SBIRs, actual SBIRs we brought in universities, and then STTRs as well. And what I found was it's best if I could keep the IP, but then if I had a certain element, like for instance, we do high voltage engineering, I had Texas Tech University develop a power supply for us, which was custom, but still rather cookbook for them. We needed it, and they were our partner. We kept all the IP related to the RF directed energy system. They didn't even know what we're building with it. We told them the specifications. We were partners, but it was very clean who owned what. They owned, the ideas of how they built this power supply, and they'd already published on them. We just wanted a custom one for our application.
Yeah, it's a complicated answer, I think, is the bottom line, right? It's not cut and dry, and it takes understanding all the ins and outs, who's on first, what's on second, what is the company trying to accomplish, all of those things.
What I found working with the university is a big issue is that your goals are different. As a company, you want to make money. As a university, the university wants to make money, but the professor that's working on it, he wants to publish papers and graduate students. And so, the company doesn't want things published. And so you're automatically at odds with what is the outcome? What is the winning outcome for each party? And it's almost always different for the two parties. So you have to be careful to make sure that you agree ahead of time how you can both benefit in the end and not just in the beginning to get some funding.
Well, and universities get rewarded for more R&D. Most universities do not get rewarded for commercializing product. Most. Some have started recognizing the need to change that somewhat, but the majority of them do not aspire to commercialize product.
So Bijou said that they're working with companies on this, and most of the time universities almost require IP share to work on an SBIR, STTR award, especially when they add new knowledge into the project work, which makes sense. I get that I understand, kind of like to Bill's point, is that's fine, but let's segregate it. And I think that's where I think, Laurie, you're talking about, we got to talk about this. We got to see what we're talking about, who's coming from what perspective, and, don't just blindly accept it.
It's not a cut and dry answer until you know all the facts is kind of the bottom line.
Yep. Okay.
So what we're working towards is a path forward. And I mean, a path forward for the SBDCs. We want to analyze and understand the needs of the clients and come up with a way to do a deep dive and actually do an initial assessment and then a deep dive, develop a guide to what are those different government opportunities, and then create a process that accelerates the results moving forward is what we're going to be working on moving forward. And to accomplish that, I want to make sure that there's dialogue and input with the SBDC counselors to see, what information helps, what doesn't help. So to that end, Alan, if you could go to the next slide. We don't have a lot of people on the call, but maybe what we can do, Alan, is come up with some kind of questionnaire for the SBDC client or counselors.
Okay.
And email them all, everybody who's participated in these. What I'd like to do is email them a questionnaire and get feedback. Like, what was the most useful? It's hard for me to know in some instances, is what's new information, what's old information, is some of it too detailed, not detailed enough? And again, what helps you do your job better? That's what we've got to determine. And then what people want to learn more about, what has been kind of redundant information or what they feel has been kind of a waste of time, and what it would be helpful to learn more about down the road.
Okay.
And then ideas on other topics or tools to explore that everybody thinks would be useful. If somebody said to me, hey, I heard about this program and it's under a certain command, say ONR, like Naval X. I haven't done a deep dive into Naval X, to be honest, and I'm starting to have dialogue with Naval X to see what they're looking for and how can small businesses connect with them and what are they planning to do moving forward. That's not something I didn't have any contracts with Naval X, so I'm not that familiar with the program, but I think it's very much worth researching it. And so I want to get feedback from SBDC counselors as we're developing this moving forward. What can really help people do their jobs better? So again, Alan, I'd like to either, I don't know if people on the line want to chime in or whether you just want to wait for to get a written
I think first of all, Mindy will have, since she's controlling the hosting, she will have a record of, now I'm going to interrupt myself. I don't know how much record she has so far of who has watched the recordings of the FAST SBIR, but she certainly has who's attended these. And so we could at least go back and pull those together, get a list, and if nothing else, what we might do would be to, if you're willing to, maybe we do a follow-up where we invite all of them back, and let's just do a follow-up roundtable. We won't even do a panel. We'll actually make it a roundtable. That way I don't have to read Bijou's answer or question. We can actually all talk together. And
That'd be great.
So grab at least one or two people from each state that has participated in this to where we can try to get a good feedback. And there'll be a little bit of variety. For Bijou, he may be a little ahead, and Alan may be way behind.
So maybe what we do, Alan, as a suggestion, and Mindy, is just blast out to whoever you want. Here's sessions, and here's recordings, and here's the topics. Here's how you can click on and watch those sessions, and then give it a little bit, and then we do the feedback loop after the period of time that those folks have had to review those, the ones that they think would be helpful, if nothing else.
I like it.
And then I know what ones are, they see as being valuable, what not, what to concentrate on, what to not. We don't need SBDC counselors to be contracting experts.
No.
But if we can just come up with a decision tree on, is it worth connecting with, say, SOCOM on this? And if so, I would absolutely tell them to develop a relationship with SoftWorks.
So I think to that point, and I don't know, we're right at almost about an hour and 5 minutes. I think we started 3 minutes late, waiting to start. But I think one of the things really I'm put it back in your court, and that is in the assessment of the client, of what we talked about before, Goldsmith model. In the Goldsmith model, if we assess the client, we being the tech coach, the business advisor, as they assess the client, what are their telltale signs? Forget technology for a moment, as far as the actual what category or anything, but what are the telltale signs of a client that has potential for success versus those that have telltale signs of that's a bad sign, or that's a negative, that's a drawback. Maybe it's just drawbacks. Because if we can train them in that way, then they can at least discover suspects. And if we discover suspects that we move them, I'm thinking sales, we move from suspect to prospect. I think this client has possibilities. Then what vehicles do we have available that could work? Which is what we're trying to understand in the SBIR world. That's what this training is about. Is it pure early SBIR, early technology SBIR? Is it some of the DoD later TRL development that they're working on? Is it outside? Has it gone beyond SBIR now? Is that not a possibility? So now I think the training today is a big one. I think today's is going to be a very important one for people to understand the opportunity and how whether the business advisor gets involved in understanding the difference in a PIA versus OTA or CRADA or anything else. If they can understand maybe some basics, fine. But if they can't, turn it over to us, saying this is according to Goldsmith and Laurie, this looks like someone that's got a good prospect for commercialization. So where we can figure out how to move them forward, or which ones we ought to be looking at, which is part of our problem. If you remember, when we first started this, I sent, for the state of Kansas, we sent out the survey to, I think, over 300. It was 400 maybe. Now, out of that 400, there's probably 100 or so that really weren't developing. So they had applied, they had participated in an SBIR meeting, seminar, or something. So they were on a list that maybe they backed out of. So out of 300, that's a lot of people to try to judge as to what we should be doing with them, especially when they're not replying. And so we need our business advisors to know they're 10, 20, or 30 to where they can assess them easier than we've getting the client to assess for us.
Right.
Okay.
Good. So any comments, questions?
Jessica, I think Jessica is the one I see on here that I recognize. Whether or not she wants to make a comment now, or if we want to wait and do the I will certainly get with Mindy, and we'll go back through and look at who's participated and get a list, and we'll talk to you on that, and then we can try to decide what action items make the most sense to try to get good feedback.
Okay.
Cool.
Good.
Any last questions or well, let's see. Elizabeth, let's see, I think this is a new one. I think it would help to see scenarios of various stages of product development and pathways to these sources, like case studies, but in an infographic. Now, I didn't pay her to say that, and that's almost exactly, Elizabeth, that is almost exactly what we're planning on doing with our CARES Act with Laurie for the state of Kansas. The funding that we have in CARES Act, we're going to do just that. We're going to try to we're going to assess our clients, what we were just talking about, and be able to decide which ones we think have the most obvious potential for impact early, and then use those as case studies with our tech coaches, our business advisors, to experience living case studies, and then use those for training purposes. That's exactly what we're planning on doing. Now, I guess, Mindy, did you just send this up? This poll?
Yes, I did. Yep.
Kansas SBDC to a friend or colleague. Oh, there's more to it. I'm like, what? Oh. Okay. So it's something you're wanting to do just right now, just to get a...
Yeah, just to kind of get some immediate feedback. So I spoke with Greg on the survey results for 888s, and doing something simple like this does count. So I thought I'd go ahead and try it out today.
Oh, okay, cool. So just asking everyone on here to go ahead and click?
Yep.
Okay, that's a pretty easy one for you. There's 6 on here, so the 6 of you can click and give it, and that way Mindy will have a immediate feedback. But we will definitely go back. I appreciate everyone that's attended this deep dive that we're doing, and I agree with Laurie. We need some feedback. I think my personal opinion is there were some that I think. I recognize some of our newbie tech coaches, if you will, the business advisor that has been business advising for a long time, but had not done anything with tech coaching. And so they were on the NASA one with Kira Blackwell. And I think that Kira's presentation was probably more, my wheels were turning on some possibilities with that, and I'll bet the one that I'm thinking of was looking at that going, I don't get it. And so some of this, it hit certain people and it didn't others, in that case.
Yeah. Okay.
Elizabeth says, LOL, I can help you with that. It's my area if needed, taking complex info to understand form. So there we go. All right. Well, all right. Elizabeth, if I'm not sure if I've got your email or not, let's see, I'll type an answer, make sure you've got mine. So if you'll send me there.
Alan, I have her info too.
Pardon me?
I have her information as well.
Okay, great. So I don't mind everybody else seeing it. What we'll do is I'll follow up with Elizabeth, and we'll work on getting some information out to at least all of the SBDC advisors that have participated, and try to get some good feedback for all of us. And like I said, we're about to shift the gears here and be able to work with Laurie. I'm so glad that COVID-19 may have been a bad thing, and I know for a lot of reasons it was, and even my own sister got it and was bad off for a while. But from that, there's also opportunity. We had our Encountering Innovation was a virtual conference this year. I think it was very productive going that route. And from that perspective, being able to work with Laurie on this is a big benefit for us, something that we wouldn't have had otherwise. So we're going to do everything we can to take advantage of it to try to learn with our clients. We've got a good base of clients from the last 3 now going on 4 years to work with. So we should have a variety of product development, from the low TRL to the higher to work with.
Well, I appreciate it. And
I think that's it. I don't see any other. Mindy, are you through with your part?
Yep.
Cool. All right. Thank
you,
you.
everybody.
Thank you, Laurie, for presenting this. This one is a big one. I'm very excited about the opportunity with these. I will Zoom. I'll send you an invite, and I'll send it out to the client as well. So we'll be reconnected in just a minute.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
See you, Vicky Bill.
Okay, bye. Bye.